Right. I think she's going to California. What I was trying to say was if we want to get started, that is fine with me. Um, I see, oh good, Anna's here, and I know Sabrina was supposed to be logging on as well.
I'm here.
Ah, there you are.
I have the weird picture because I'm the host. So,
It's our
yeah.
seal. It's not a weird picture.
It's not my name like everybody else's.
So, okay, then I think we're ready to get started.
All right. And we're already live to the YouTube, so you're good to
So,
just get started.
okay, well, good evening. This is the May 2nd meeting of the Economic and Community Development meeting. In attendance is council members Melissa Murray, Jim Freyer, Barbara Smith, Heather Dunn, Jalen Seed, and Johan Lopez. Um, Before we get to public participation, I just wanted to make a quick program note. Just given recent events, I imagine I can speak for everyone in saying how grateful we are for Norwalk Fire Department and the Norwalk Police Department and all of our law enforcement for their really incredible work today surrounding the calamitous motor vehicle collision that caused the enormous fire on the Fairfield Avenue Bridge under I-95. I mean, we've been talking about this all day. I've been looking at pictures all day, and it is truly incredible that they were able to quell the fire in about 2 hours, and that there were no one's hurt. I mean, what a miracle! So, and obviously, school is canceled tomorrow for those who maybe didn't know. But I just wanted to just say that at the top and just express our thanks to all the people who really, really, really made this horrible situation so much better than it could have been. Um, with that, is anyone here for public participation? I do see a couple hands up. I just want to remind everyone of the rules. If you are going to do public participation, the rule is you get 3 minutes and it has to be related to something on the agenda. Um, so those are the rules. And with that, who's ready to speak? I see two people.
Diane, I'll allow you to speak first. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you, Chairman Goldstein. Good words about today's conflagration. I appreciate it. My name is Diane Loricella, 21 Little Fox Lane. Tonight I'm here to speak on the 3 items on the agenda. I'll combine 2. The first is in section B, as in boy, the 55 MLK Drive, otherwise known as the Webster Street lot. Many of you on this call probably are not aware that there was a point where the city had a brownfields task force. It was during Mayor Moshe, and it was because there were grant monies available, and I was on that particular task force. I know that it's been shifted to Brian and his team in the redevelopment agency. I do want you all to know there is and should be a list of the brownfields that we know of in the city. It is not just this site. The reason I wanted to speak is I wanted to know from the staff, right now there is green infrastructure that we, of course, made a big deal about, and it was a good thing, right next to green infrastructure, meaning a more superficial way to deal with polluted runoff or stormwater runoff, right in the corner near the movie house. I wanted to know, will this publicly paid for green infrastructure be destroyed, and what was the cost of its building in the first place? And can you please try to keep it there intact and integrate it into the work with the parking garage that I think we're going to have, but I'm not sure. I hope we can save it because it was a good thing and it cost money. Lastly, I just wanted to state that under C, business development and tourism, I want to give kudos to Sabrina and Anna in helping with, in a great way, and the city, and all of you that helped on the Earth Day on the Green. Sabrina and Anna did a fantastic job. Anna found a terrific group of, and so because they're going to be talking to you about the 2025 events, going forward, though, I must ask that you all, including the staff, take a look at the events from the perspective of the taxpayer, so that please, as I've asked before, make sure that there are corporate and business sponsors of many of these events. And there are ways, like other towns have done, to develop ethical standards and rotate the sponsors in place. I know that there was some talk about that concern. I do think the taxpayers and all of you have something to discuss when large amounts of money are spent on things that are good for the people, but we could have gotten corporate or business sponsors, and then we don't have the money for part-time zoning enforcement officers and other important needed expenditures. So thank you very much for your time and efforts, and I thank you tonight.
Thank you, Diane. Next for public participation.
Hi, council members. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Excellent. I'll try and keep it brief. I want to speak on something that pertains to both of the items under transportation, mobility, and parking, both the Route 1 corridor study and the complete streets update. And that is also having to do with as Ms. Lauricella called it, the conflagration this morning. Watching all the events unfold this morning, from my perspective, underscored the importance of building a transportation system that is resilient. We have talked a lot as a city about sustainability and resilience in the last year or two, and talked a lot about how resilience pertains to flood control, but I think today we all saw how it pertains to transportation, and in particular along the Route 1 corridor, as well as in other places around the city. The need for a transportation system that is not wholly reliant on driving was absolutely underscored today as the traffic poured off of I-95 and clogged up our city streets, that it rendered them essentially unusable for most people in Norwalk who don't have other good options besides to drive. And so today they had no good options. But I'm envisioning a future, and I think that we, through Complete Streets, we as a city are trying to envision a future where we have a more diverse transportation network, where in the event of a crisis that we can that people have options, that they have high quality options, and that we don't grind to a halt as a city when we experience a crisis like this. I'm working on a draft of an op-ed that'll be publishing soon with more details on this topic, but I hope to see that the Route 1 study prioritizes walking and biking and public transit to these ends, and also that we take Complete Streets as seriously as possible. And I look forward to the updates today. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanner. Does anyone else raise their hand or want to make a public comment? I see a few attendees, two of whom have already made public comment, and I don't see any hands up. So going once, going twice. I think we can close public participation. And let's move on. Just the first thing, approval of the minutes of the April 4th, 2024 special meeting capital budget bonanza. Does anyone have a motion? Councilmember Smith. Any amendments, corrections, changes? If not, all in favor of approval of the minutes of the April 4th, 2024 special meeting? I don't think there was anyone. Melissa, is this an abstention, or actually, I'm not sure.
I don't vote in this meeting. I am.
You know what? All right. Well, I just wanted to make sure.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So we're on to new business, transportation, mobility, and parking. We'll start with the first item, even though Mr. Garrett Bolella is handling both of them. So Garrett, I guess, the floor is yours. You can take them in whatever order you want. But I assume you want to go in order.
Yeah, I'll stick to the order that's on the agenda. If you don't mind, I'll share my screen as well. Brief presentation. Hopefully, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. So good evening, everyone. Really excited to be here to talk about the Norwalk, the master plan study for Route 1. I really wanted to, by way of this conversation tonight, this is really the first engagement we've done with the project, but really wanted to just leave you with a general outline of the project, talk a little bit about the scope, the vision and goals, a little bit detailed description of the study area, what that includes, what the study is intended to address and what it will not address, and also set expectations for some of the outcomes for the study. We have a really detailed engagement strategy, so I just like to highlight some of the first steps in that strategy, and then talk a little bit about the deliverables and the outcomes for the project. So for this project, we're really looking at this master plan study, and we're really talking about how we can enhance mobility within the corridor, how we can improve safety, and also improve accessibility. And this study is going to be unique in that we're really looking for a number of short-term outcomes and really actionable items. It's an FHWA, a federal highway funded study, and they're really looking to not have these documents sit on the shelf any longer. So at the conclusion of this project, they're going to be looking for WestCog to attach funding to some of the recommendations. So we see this as a very actionable plan. We're going to, through this engagement, we're going to look at how we can address current transportation needs, future transportation needs. Everyone knows it's a high crash corridor. It's actually one of the highest crash corridors in the city. So we're going to look at how we can improve safety along the corridor and how that'll align with our Vision Zero strategy. This comes at a really unique time. We're going to look at how we can apply our complete streets lens to this corridor, and look at different outcomes for the cross sections of the street, the aesthetics, and this is a really important gateway to the community. So as I mentioned, the project, so it's just see if I can, there we go. So it's a FHWA largely funded project. CTDOT is also participating in the funding, and there is a small city match as well. But this was a grant application, a $300,000 grant application that we wrote sometime last year. WestCog administers the project, so our local council of governments, and we're working closely with WestCog and CONDOT as partners, in addition to our city agencies, our planning and zoning, Norwalk Transit. And this is a really good opportunity to get everyone in the same room. Route 1 is under the state jurisdiction. They maintain the majority of the signals on the roadway. We have ownership of some, but it does make it challenging when you're trying to coordinate and optimize a traffic signal network that you don't have control over. So one of the outcomes of this study will be getting everyone in the room to determine how we could, for example, improve operations, reduce congestion. There's a lot of stop and go traffic on the corridor today. So this is the actual study area that you can see on the screen. We kind of joke it is a little bit like a whale, the shape of a whale, but it is Route 1 all the way from West Norwalk Road. It includes Connecticut Avenue, Van Buren. It extends all the way up to Spring Hill, Riverside, and the intersection of Belden. But the study, and I want to emphasize, is also a lot more. So it includes the parallel roadways and extends into the adjacent neighborhoods of West Norwalk and down, and extends down towards Rowayton. So we have included in the study area West Cedar Street to the north and Flax Hill Road to the south. It was really important that we got all of the cross streets included in the corridor, so we can look at, for example, Scribner Avenue and some of the challenges with the Interstate 95 ramps that exist today, and also the congestion at that intersection. But I did want to emphasize it is much more of a geographic area than just the Route 1 corridor itself. And I think based on my conversations with many residents, what I hear often is, we avoid the corridor at all costs. But I think it's really important that while this is a state road, it is still a road within our local network, and provides access and mobility to our adjacent neighborhoods. So we have to look at how we can better fit this in with the fabric of Norwalk as well. So these are just the next couple slides are just a couple snapshots of how the road has grown. So you can see 1899, how the corridor existed, the different land use patterns, but it was largely residential. And in 1934, you started to see like the actual development of the corridor, and you started to really see the density increase, and then along came Interstate 95 before 7, but you started to see the corridor change and start to become this retail and commercial destination. And then fast forward to 2024, where you see 7, you see a lot of our big box retailers, and this really lands us where we are today. But I did want to emphasize with this project, this corridor means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So we want to capture the business community and have conversations with all those stakeholders. This is, a regional destination. It's a commercial hub. So we have a lot of, regional trips, and it's really important. There's a lot of jobs. It's a major employer. It's a corridor that provides primary access to some of our most valuable institutions, for example, Norwalk Community College. And it's a major transit corridor. So it is a lot to a lot of different people. So we're trying to get everyone in the room and really have these conversations so that we could balance all the different transportation needs along the corridor. We spent a lot of time walking the corridor, and we actually had all the consultants come in when they applied for the RFQ. And we did a bus tour of the street, but we actually got out and walked the street. And, for many of you very familiar with the roadway, it's grown a lot over time. I think it's grown in a very autocentric way. The curb to curb width has expanded, the right of way has expanded, capacity has increased for vehicles. But, these are just some pictures that highlight, some of the other modes that were left behind. And this is something that we're really looking to address through complete streets. But as an example, we really, on the image on the left, we just lack true transit facilities and connections. And we lack that first and last mile connection to transit. There's a really lack of crosswalks. And on the next slide, you can see we have these sidewalk gaps throughout the corridor, which, require people to walk in the street or are completely impassable for those with ADA challenges. So, part of this project is to look back at the corridor, look at all these modes and determine how we can better balance our investments into the corridor. This snapshot on the right, I think everyone who's familiar with the corridor knows there's just so many curb cuts, and there's so much different access to the corridor, and you have all of this parking along the corridor. There's truly a lot of it, but how do we look at opportunities for shared parking, for reducing some of the access and the curb cuts to the corridor to help reduce some of the conflict points and start to address some of the congestion that we're seeing on the roadway today. So we've done a lot of studies, and we're not going to reinvent the wheel, but we're going to build on these. I'll talk a little bit about our transportation master plan and some of the findings, but also this builds on some of the recommendations of the POCD, and we recently changed the zoning for this corridor to a community district, a general urban corridor. But I showed the previous slides of where we were, and the next question really is, how did we get there, and how do we realize the vision for the new zoning regulations and what we want the corridor to look like. These are just a couple excerpts from the transportation master plan, which is available on our website. But the corridor on the westerly end, carries 30,000 vehicles a day. So it is heavily trafficked. So we have to find a way to balance that with the other modes. You can see on the slide on the right, if we can start to address and improve some of the operations, we can start to address congestion. It's one of the most congested corridors in the city. And Tanner spoke earlier at the start of this meeting. It has to accommodate for operations on 95. So how do we balance that? I think there's a lot of opportunities, through the retiming of signals. We started to look at some adaptive signals with the advent of Wegmans. They'll be introducing some adaptive technologies, which are essentially traffic signals that operate in real time and measure demand and react to that demand, as opposed to the signals today on the roadway, which have fixed timing patterns and have limited flexibility to accommodate change. So, that's something that can help with incident management. It certainly won't solve when the roadway is completely shut down, but it can help better accommodate when there's surges or special events or things of that nature. So there is a lot of opportunity. The image on the left, this shows the corridor, and you'll see some intersections in orange. Those are really hot spots, but I mentioned Scribner before. It's one of our highest crash locations within the city. Also Richards Avenue scores really highly, but for example, if we start to optimize the timing, we reduce the number of stops at lights, we reduce the number of rear ends, and you start to see a reduction in crashes. And this is really important to the city as a whole as we look to adopt Vision Zero in the future, where we look to limit fatalities and serious injuries. And one of the interesting things is just the graphic on the right. We learned this in the master plan. There's a tremendous amount of trips on this corridor that are just going from, retail destination to retail destination within less than a mile. So looking at opportunities, how we can cut down on the number of trips being generated, and, potential access management and shared access and parking. So this is just a quick graphic of the new zoning. But what I wanted to emphasize is, oh, I'm not sure if you can see. Is this next screen loading?
No, it's not.
No, sorry, no.
Okay, well, I can just describe it. So I have my slides here, but
It's very symbolic.
it was just it's terrible because it was a really great graphic, but it shows kind of what the new zoning regulations look at with reduced setbacks for the buildings, new streetscape, more internal access drives to share, and how it's going to accommodate mixed use development. We see a number of new residences and residential development happening on the corridor, but it's largely been designed to accommodate automobiles. So how do we make it more comfortable for our new residents on the roadway? I apologize that the slides aren't loading, but I'll run through it almost at the end of the presentation. But where we are now, we're really in the discovery phase. So tonight is really the first time we're bringing this forward. What we are looking to do is have our first public engagement meeting on May 20th. So we're looking at Jefferson School, which is along Van Buren Avenue along the corridor. We're looking at holding it, so it's a Monday from 5:30 to 7:30. But to share more in depth tonight, some of the information and the existing conditions. We'll have a lot more media, a lot more social media over the next days. Invitation to the meeting, but we wanted to, by way of this meeting, invite everyone to attend. We chose that site specifically. It's got great access, so we can capture the transit community. Those times work well around the bus schedules. We wanted the first public meeting to be along the corridor, and we wanted to make sure that we invite all the different neighborhoods. So this project impacts West Norwalk, it impacts Oak Hills, it impacts Brookside, the Golden Hill area. So we want all of those neighborhoods to participate, and we're also reaching out to the Chamber of Commerce and also the businesses. So, we hope it will be well attended. And this is really just the first meeting to engage the community, introduce the project. Over the summer, we're really going to be looking at collecting and doing the due diligence with our consultants, FHI, in the project discovery. So we'll be collecting all the traffic volumes within the corridor. We'll be doing the safety analysis. We'll be looking at access management. We'll be looking at how the new land use can promote complete streets. We'll be looking at economic development potential along the corridor, all of that, so that we can reconvene in September and really have a meeting where we can incorporate some of the findings of that discovery. We can talk about the analysis, start to talk about what's possible, and in September, talk about the strengths of the corridor, the weaknesses, some of the opportunities and the challenges we see from the data. So again, just emphasizing that this is just the very beginning of the process, but we have a really robust engagement plan, and we'll continue over the course of the next year. And on our website, so if you go to our transportation, mobility, and traffic page, you'll see at the very, very top of the page, there's a link to this project, which will also send you to the WestCog site, where you can find the map, you can find the project schedule, which will really take us to the end of August 2025, and you can find some of this preliminary information I shared tonight. But I really wanted to leave it open to your committee to ask any questions that you might have about the project itself or the upcoming engagement meetings.
Thank you, Garrett. I'm going to throw it. Does anyone have any questions? Well, Barbara,
Yeah, I don't have any specific questions. Thanks for the presentation. I just thank you for always including the public in the public engagement discussions. You've done a really good job of that, and so I know you'll continue doing that great work. Public buy-in is really important, and what the community's needs are, need to be heard and considered. So, glad you're doing that again.
Thank you.
I echo what Councilmember Smith said. I appreciate you giving us a sense of the timeline. And I think that and I know this sort of dovetails with your next subject, with complete streets, but I do think that it's good for the public to know that we're not thinking of these issues, I would say, in silos. We're really kind of thinking about it all together, all at the same time. Councilmember Seed.
Yeah, I just had a question because I know we're trying to get everybody at the table, but I just wanted to confirm that like emergency services are at that table and can kind of tune into like the needs that they have. Because I know like Route 1 is a major artery for like the emergency services to get around the hospitals right there, and the fire department and a lot of different things.
Yeah, we will certainly make sure they're included. And Josh, to your point, I forgot to mention, but one of the challenges has been with all the recent applications, whether it's Wegmans, whether it's Costco, whether it's Target, is not having a true vision for what the corridor looks like. It's really hard to address their transportation impact, and what our needs are, and then make sure we're being consistent in our application and achieving what the master plan is. So to some degree, like when you drive down the road today, you experience that because none of the curb to curb widths are the same. You're jockeying to switch lanes. There's a lot of confusion, and we've traditionally just approached it on a development by development process, and looked at their frontage and maybe a couple of intersections. But this really gives us the choice to get a really cohesive, consistent corridor. And then when you drive through Norwalk, right, it is a gateway. It is people's first impression, and we can really look at how we keep consistent aesthetics like through the entirety of the corridor and to the adjacent municipalities too.
Does anyone else have any additional questions about the Route 1 presentation? All right, Garrett. Number 2.
All right, I have no slides for this one, so I apologize for the hiccup before. But I did want to provide a brief update on Complete Streets. So, we see the light at the end of the tunnel. So this is really, we're looking to wrap up the process by the end of this year. So, that's really going to start with a presentation that I will give to the ordinance committee later this month. We're really going to talk about we've drafted an ordinance to this date. It's really, I'd say it's very robust. We want to provide, all the information relevant to the committee so that they can make it, a uniquely Norwalk ordinance and tailor it. But in May, I'd like to reintroduce Complete Streets to the ordinance committee, and we'll be giving an update. And then we'll also be talking about, how we arrived at this draft ordinance, what we really looked at. We really looked at best practice. There's really like 10 different, controlling criteria. And I just want to give a primer on that, the different policy elements, whether it's, how we arrived at our commitment and vision, because I think Norwalk is unique. And I think we are going to have the most comprehensive Complete Streets ordinance in the state. It's grown so much over time. When people first started talking about Complete Streets, it was really bike ped heavy. And then it really became about not just bike pads, but also, how do we create sustainable streets? And it just kept evolving over time, elements, that kind of crept its way in during COVID, is how we create senses of place and how we better use the curbside. So I think it's grown tremendously. It has when thinking about Complete Streets, we want to think about the entire right of way and not just the curb to curb. So I think we will have a really robust policy, but we'll talk a little bit about the commitment vision, how we arrived at where we are, what communities we should be prioritizing, whether that's our students and our safe routes to school, or those that don't have access to vehicles. talk a little bit about how we arrived at, which projects, Complete Streets apply to. It's really all projects. But outline how we got to an exceptions process. So there's a lot of different details that went into it, but I will give that presentation. And we see moving forward through the ordinance committee over the course of the spring, and we hope that there will be a draft or a final draft ordinance for presentation and public hearing early in the fall, and that will really set us up for the adoption of this ordinance by the end of the year. We are, and the timing is really great because we are also working on a demonstration project too. So in May, we'll also be bringing before the traffic authority a project for North Main and Ann Street. And we're looking at the second Sunday or third Sunday of June as a rain date. But what this demonstration project is it's really going to show the potential through a quick hit implementation project. So at North Main and Ann Street, we're looking at there's a really low volume right turn lane. We're looking at roping that off with delineators and painting some curb extensions. And involving the community. So we also invite you to participate, but we'll be looking for some hands to come out, and we'll have lots of paint brushes and buckets of paint. But to paint these curb extensions, the project will include an additional crosswalk. We've been really adamant that, if a driver can make all movements at an intersection, the pedestrian should be able to flow in any direction they want, and they shouldn't have to, chart and navigate their path through an intersection. It should be really intuitive, and they should just be able to flow like water. So we'll be adding another crosswalk. And that intersection is really great because I think we were talking, the cinema is right there, but you have a sidewalk that has 2 different levels, right? One that's not even ADA accessible. And then the lower level of the sidewalk is filled with appurtenances that make it very difficult to walk a straight line, whether it's poles, traffic signal poles, and hydrants. So we'll be actually creating a curb extension in the street, which will be really wide and be separated with flex post delineators. And there'll be nice ramps to get you down. But all of this is going to change the feel of that location. And we'll also have an area set aside for a kiosk, which people can engage with and provide feedback, whether they want to share their feelings about the comfort level at this intersection, or just get some more information about the overall project. But that'll be happening in early June, which coincides really well with the provision of the ordinance. And we're also simultaneously working on a draft design guide. We're working to a 60% draft of that design guide. But the plan is for us to have that design guide completed as well by the end of the year. And that will be our toolkit so that we can move forward. And one of the important things about Complete Streets is, it doesn't just apply to transportation mobilities projects or the city of Norwalk's projects, but it applies to all agencies operating within the city. It applies to, the state, and it also applies to private developers. So this will be a really comprehensive guide, but it will allow us to, really rapidly create real, meaningful, and sustainable change in any project that takes place in the right of way.
Yeah,
That is the timeline in a nutshell. And I'm again happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Councilmember Murray.
Yes, Garrett, thank you so much for all you do. I just wanted to highlight the mobility part of this. I was going to ask about it, but you did kind of touch on it at the end. I live in a district where we have a great number of seniors for senior homes, and they're really always asking for improvements. So this is going to be very exciting for them when we really have a full Complete Streets implementation across the whole city. They're, very bus dependent or dependent on van service and things like that, but they want more walkable options. So I want to make sure that we're reaching out to include them, because I do hear quite a bit of feedback in that. And then the other thing that my interest in mobility is, I found, and I think this is going to address that, but maybe you can tell me how, is some of these, crossing the street, if you're in a wheelchair, or if you're a child, or even a able-bodied adult, you can do it pretty quickly. But those street crossings can be pretty quick right now with the lights for seniors to get across in time. So how does that address it, or how does all this work together for that specific segment of our population?
Yeah, so I think to your first point, so we have a draft flyer today. We're working on getting that out, so I can certainly share that with you. But if there's any targeted populations or facilities or buildings you'd like us to reach out to and provide that direct notification, we're more than happy to do that. I think that so the demonstration project is a really great example of how we make it. We do these curb extensions, and we really we reduce the crossing distance and the time that people are exposed to traffic to help them get across. But I also think a lot of times people leave out that complete streets isn't we're not abandoning the car. So when you talk about the shortened time at signals, it's also looking at traffic signals and making sure we have the right clearance times. And clearance times should be adjusted based on the population too. So if it's in the vicinity of a community home or a more vulnerable population that might not be able to cross the street as fast, we should be looking at how we adjust the clearance times at those specific locations, but also how we provide a baseline across the city that can accommodate everyone. So I do want to put an emphasis on it. It's not leaving out the traffic signals. It's looking at the timings as on those traffic signals as well, because you do bring up a really good point. And that's something we'll be looking at in the Route 1 corridor study, as we start to analyze all the traffic signal timings on that corridor as well. Those are some long crossings.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
Thank you. I just, Garrett, I mean, this is, for those who, I mean, I know there are a lot of people who've been here longer than I have and who have seen this sort of start at its infancy really a while ago. I think a little context, and Garrett, tell me if I'm wrong about any of this. Norwalk would be the 15th municipality in the state of Connecticut.
Mhm.
Current municipalities that have already adopted complete streets include Hartford, New Haven, and Stamford.
Yeah.
So it's, we would certainly not be the biggest. Actually, Fairfield just adopted it, I think, either late last year or early this year.
Yeah, last year.
So, I mean, there's a lot to work from, and Jim and Garrett bring a lot to the table, both from experience and also a lot of insights and sort of seeing a lot of how other municipalities have sort of made their way through complete streets, and that's part of our process as well. Just so everyone has a little more context, and I know, Garrett, we had a meeting about this recently. I don't know if our draft ordinance is going to be ready to roll by May, but we're certainly going to do a presentation on it in May. And obviously, I encourage all of you to go check it out at the ordinance meeting in a few weeks. But I do, we've had a consultant who's worked with us, on this for a while. They've provided a lot of helpful materials, and including a very robust ordinance draft that we are currently working on condensing and making that much more effective. So that's sort of where we are on that now. But this will be a process that'll take us through most of the rest of this year to both implement the ordinance, which is separate from the policy, and the design guide. Those are separate documents. So I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page there. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of time for input and a lot of meetings, public meetings, private meetings, but there's going to be a lot of time for everyone to get their feedback in and help us make this as best as we can. So I really do encourage people to, send all their ideas our way. With that, Garrett, anything else before we move on to the next item?
No, unless you don't have any more questions. But thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Garrett. Have a good evening.
You too.
Okay, so we are on, this is item 2B under redevelopment agency. This is a very long set of items, so suffice it to say, I'm going to condense it instead of reading the whole thing into the record. Hello?
You have to read the whole thing, Josh. Sorry.
Okay, I tried. All right, so then I'm going to read them, and then Brian, then the show is yours. Redevelopment agency. This is because, by the way, this is penance for me, always getting the short council agenda whenever I have to read the consent calendar. So here we go.
Josh, sorry, just one at a time. Just
Yep.
so you know, one at a time. The first one.
Yep. So this is B1, resolution authorizing the mayor to participate in the Brownfield Municipal Grant Program to support the environmental remediation and redevelopment of 55 MLK Drive, (Webster Street lot). whereas pursuant to CGS section 32-763, the Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development is authorized to extend financial assistance for economic development projects. And whereas it is desirable and in the public interest that the City of Norwalk and the Norwalk Redevelopment Agency make an application to the state for $3 million in order to undertake the 55 MLK Webster Street lot brownfield cleanup project and to execute an assistance agreement. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Common Council of Norwalk, one, that it is cognizant of the conditions and prerequisites for the state financial assistance imposed by CGS section 32-763. Two, that the filing of an application for state financial assistance by the City of Norwalk and Norwalk Redevelopment Agency in an amount not to exceed $3 million is hereby approved, and that Mayor Harry Rilling is directed to execute and file such application with the Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development, to provide such additional information, to execute such other documents as may be required, to execute an assistance agreement with the state of Connecticut for state financial assistance if such an agreement is offered, to execute any amendments, decisions, and revisions thereto, and to act as the authorized representative of the City of Norwalk. That's item 1.
I'll move that for you.
Thank you. Brian, I'm wondering if we should read these both and move them together.
They are tied together if that works for you.
Yeah, which is why I'm thinking I might as well. I had a little drink beforehand, might as well get this out of the way. Not alcohol. 2, resolution authorizing the mayor to participate in the Community Investment Fund 2030 program to support the redevelopment of 55 MLK Drive, Webster Street lot. Whereas pursuant to CGS 32-285A, the Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development is authorized to extend financial assistance for economic development projects. And whereas it is desirable and in the public interest that the City of Norwalk and Norwalk Redevelopment Agency make an application to the state for $8 million in order to undertake the 55 MLK Webster Street lot Community Investment Fund project and to execute an assistance agreement. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Common Council of Norwalk, 1, that it is cognizant of the conditions and prerequisites for the state financial assistance imposed by CGS section 32-285A, and 2, that the filing of an application for the state financial assistance by the City of Norwalk and Norwalk Redevelopment Agency in an amount not to exceed $8 million is hereby approved, and that Mayor Harry Rilling is directed to execute and file such application with the Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development to provide such additional information, to execute such other documents as may be required, to execute an assistance agreement with the state of Connecticut for state financial assistance if such an agreement is offered, to execute any amendments, decisions, and revisions thereto, and to act as the authorized representative of the City of Norwalk. Do I have a motion for the second item? Councilmember Freyer. Okay, so with us tonight to discuss this is Brian Bedoli, Director of the Redevelopment Agency, and Darren Callahan, our contract legal expert, and will help us explain this.
All right. Well, thank you, Chairman. So I'll provide the brief update and I'll kick it over to Darren for some of the more technical items regarding. So first of all, apologies for the long resolution that came straight from the state. That was not my choice. I wanted to just make sure that we had that on the record. But I appreciate you reading it in. And I could talk a little bit high level about the project. I know we talked about it before at this group, the Webster Lot project. A lot of eyes been on that. The redevelopment of the existing surface parking lot into about 430 to 480 unit mixed-use residential village right there in the heart of downtown. I know it's been on the books for a long time. There's been a number of planning studies all the way back to 2004, then get reinvigorated through our recent procurement process where we've identified a qualified developer to enter in negotiations with, and that's what we've been actively involved with. We did a good deal of public outreach over the past year, but for the past 6 to 9 months, we've been in negotiation mode, trying to make sure that the finances work on the site, make sure that obviously in any public-private partnership that the city is well represented, and that we're deriving the maximum public benefit that we can as part of that. We are obviously in an active negotiation. So that's not specifically the topic for tonight's meeting. What's the topic for tonight is the state assistance that we've obtained for the project. And that is to the tune of, as noted, $3 million from DECD in their Brownfields program. And I'll talk a little bit about that scope, and also $8 million from DECD, the Department of Economic and Community Development, through the Community Investment Fund for more site infrastructure related items. So in terms of the specific scope, one thing that encumbers the Webster lot is a history of contamination. So there is about a $5 to $5.5 million price tag to clean up that site. We've been very aggressive in trying to pursue outside resources to do that. It's very critical to make the numbers work on the site, given other encumbrances such as the parking requirement that needs to be maintained. Obviously, you have 650, approximately 650 parking spaces out there. Those need to be structured, and that is not typically a cheap endeavor. So with the land economics, we're really reliant on outside resources to actually make the numbers work in our negotiations. So the $5 million that we need has been obtained through $3 million through DECD, and we also received another $2 million EPA grant. So we're pretty confident that we're going to have enough to do the requisite cleanup for the site. But what's required from the state in order to access those funds is an assistance agreement, and that's what's referenced in the resolution. So effectively, what we're requesting tonight is authorization to enter into that assistance agreement so we can secure those funds and advance our negotiation. Ultimately, if we do not have these resources, that affects the price tag and the cost of the lot for the prospective purchaser, which is obviously to the detriment of the city. So we're really relying on these state resources to fill the funding gaps that are required. The same goes for the $8 million we received from the Community Investment Fund. So this program is more focused on site infrastructure. There's a number of infrastructure items that would need to be upgraded in order to facilitate development on Webster Lot. One of them being a very, very old brick sewer line that runs through the site. So we want to make sure that we have the requisite dollars to upgrade that. So part of that $8 million would be allocated towards the site infrastructure. Also relocating utility laterals to accommodate various development paths. And a lot of that is still being negotiated, but at the end of the day, we need to have these resources in our pocket and secured from the state in order to even advance those negotiations. Because right now it's a relatively big unknown. I mean, even if the state's awarded it, we don't have the agreement in place. So we've been working with the state, apprising them of where we're at. Obviously, this process is going to follow our typical public-private partnership process that we've developed in recent years through a land disposition agreement. That has not been brought to you guys yet, but that will be brought to you. And we communicated with the state, just wanting to make sure that the sequence of approvals was in order. Obviously, we're here because the state wants to have these grants resolved by May, is their request to us. And obviously, without the LDA currently, they've agreed that they will put the funds in an escrow account, in an escrow agreement for us on both of the programs, the Brownfields program and the SIF program. And we'll be able to unlock those funds once we have a land disposition agreement approved by the council. So there's another look at the actual project that will occur. You're not necessarily authorizing the project here. You're authorizing the access to the funds from DECD. So there's a number of other technical items. So I have Darren Callahan from Corporation Council here today to talk about some of the typical things that the city encounters when deploying an assistance or entering into an assistance agreement for DECD. But that's sort of the high level, and maybe I could kick it over to Darren, or if there's any questions right now, I'm happy to stop either way.
Anyone got questions? Okay, Darren?
Good evening. Yeah, thank you. So that was a pretty robust description of the DEC grant process by Brian. So I'm going to be pretty short, but essentially DECD probably about 2 or 3 years ago revamped their granting process and created a transactional process similar to what you would see if you were closing on a lending transaction, on a commercial lending transaction. So the state AG's office came up with a template, what they call a financial assistance agreement. That template is non-negotiable. We've tried and we tried and we tried again. So it is what it is sort of agreement. It is the cost of accessing the funds. In addition to executing the financial assistance agreement, typically DECD will require some form of security interest securing the financial assistance extended. What we found in development cases, we were entering into a public-private partnership, is they're looking for things such as a second position mortgage, a negative pledge, or a declaration of restricted covenant on the land. Those things, just unpacking them, are just ways for the DECD to ensure that they're going to get what it is they want out of their grant agreement. For example, if they are requiring that some percentage of the residential units that are going to be that the grant money is going to be used to support either through infrastructure or otherwise are going to be affordable housing, they're going to want a deed restriction on the land records encumbering the property and requiring that percentage of affordable housing. So that's just in a nutshell. They also require these very lengthy resolutions, which you were just forced to read into the record. And that is why it was necessary to read it in full.
Special assist to Councilmember Smith for that one.
So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but it's a pretty much cookie cutter process that the state has come up with. And those are the kind of the four sides of it.
Just one quick question, and I assume, I can't remember if you said this, so forgive me. Upon approval of the LDA, or what is the next step required to formally unlock the funds? Do we send a letter? Do we have to pass a resolution that accompanies the LDA? You know, what's the mechanism?
Yeah, so we haven't received the actual escrow agreement because they're currently drafting that right now. But the intent, as we've discussed with them, is it would just be notification. It'd be basically fait accompli that we would have the funds. They would just be wouldn't be released until we had the full land disposition agreement approved.
So you send a letter with a copy of the fully approved LDA saying unlock.
Yeah, I mean, similar. We did the same thing. It was a little bit putting the carriage before the horse on the community challenge grant. That's what kind of amended this process. But yeah, as soon as they had the LDA, it was tied as this agreement. It was written in there that would effectuate the money being available. And one of the things, so everyone's eyes wide open, that we're very cognizant of is to Darren's point, when you start spending these resources, there's an assumption that you're going to deliver on the full project. So we're being very cognizant in the land disposition agreement process to make sure that there's security for the city in order so that if we do expend funds, that you guys are covered in the event something does fall through. So that's been part of the negotiation. Just thinking ahead to the land disposition agreement discussion that we will have. But what the escrow agreement allows us to do is give you guys surety now, even though we're entering to the assistance agreement, that none of that money is going to be spent until we have an approved project by this body.
Okay, do any council members have any additional questions for Brian or Darren? Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, just thanks for such a thorough explanation of everything, Brian. And it's pretty incredible that the state is willing to set these funds aside in an escrow until we have our project set. So I, got to give them kudos for that.
Councilmember Freyer.
Yeah, so just to be clear on this, that we're not exposed in any way until down the road, until we decided that we're going to go ahead with the deal altogether. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the agreement we reached with the state. I mean, until we start spending any money, the exposure is limited. And the devil's obviously the details on the assistance agreements and the various land disposition agreement that we developed. But at the time, this is how we're preserving, the lack of exposure.
And is there a termination date on the escrow agreement?
That has not been discussed. No.
It's open-ended?
As it stands now. Like I said, we don't have it right now, but they're asking that we close this out for May.
So we've got to sign quickly. Okay.
The financial
Thank you.
agreement requires that the funds be expended within a certain period of time. So ultimately,
I can't hear you, Darren. Can you speak up?
I'm sorry about that. I need to get my speaker fixed. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
The financial assistance agreement, the proposal requires us to expend the funds within a certain period of time, it's either 10 or 5 or 10 years, with some 1 year or so it's extension available upon request. So I mean, ultimately the contemplation by DECD is that we will have a LDA for them to review and approve, as well as the council, obviously, within a reasonable period of time.
Okay.
Does any other members have any questions? Okay. With that, I think we're going to need to vote on them. I think we should vote on them separately just to make sure that this is clean and the record is clean. So I'm first going to call for a vote on the first item. And I'm not going to read the whole thing again, but again, this is the resolution authorizing the mayor to participate in the Brownfield Municipal Grant Program to support the environmental remediation and redevelopment of 55 MLK Drive, Webster Street lot. All in favor? That's unanimous. Okay, now the second item. And again, I had read it into the record previously, but I'm just going to read the first paragraph. This is a vote on the resolution authorizing the mayor to participate in the Community Investment Fund 2030 program and support the redevelopment of 55 MLK Drive, Webster Street lot. All in favor of taking this to the full council? And that is also unanimous. Brian, Darren, thank you very much for all your work in helping us through this process.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Have a good evening.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, for our final category of items, business development and tourism. The first item is a FY 2025 special events presentation by Sabrina Kadeski and Anna Brault. But I'm going to kick it off. Sabrina, take it away.
Thanks, Josh, and hello, everybody. This is actually going to be Anna's baby this turn, but I just wanted to give a brief overview of actually the 3 items, which we'll talk about separately in more detail, but the actual presentation will touch on a lot of the information that the other 2 items on the agenda, which we'll be voting on tonight. The events presentation will run you through kind of everything we've done up to this point, what we're doing for 2024, and what we can forecast into the rest of the fiscal year. It'll include kind of our partnerships that we've had, all the smaller events we've had, the larger events, as well as our sponsorship package, and how we're looking for individuals to help us out to offset the cost of our events. So Anna will go into that, and I'll give it over to her, I promise, in 1 second. There's been a lot of questions around the return on investment for our events, what our businesses are seeing, the actual dollar amount, if we can quantify that. The Placer AI contract is actually specifically targeting that information for us. The software is able to track sales tax revenue increases, which will say one day, the day before event, our sales tax was this, or one weekend before their sales tax revenue was this. And then the weekend of our event, we can actually calculate and see that increase in sales tax revenue, which directly correlates to obviously increases in sales for businesses. So we're really interested in that. But also the actual increase in attendance. So the actual people that are physically coming to our events. So we'll have a pretty dead set number on that with that software as well. And then we'll get into kind of the cost of actually putting on these events, which is where the ARC contract comes in, which is our selected preferred vendor for the soundstage and lighting contract, which I can talk about in more detail as well. The vendor will be on for that portion as well. So if we have specific questions that we can't answer, they'll be on to answer them as well. So with that, Anna, take it over.
All right, Anna, the floor is yours.
Thanks. I'm going to share my screen if that's all right.
Cool.
All right. Okay. There we go. If it would load. There we go. Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's enjoying their night in and not out in the craziness. I live near the hospital, and every so often I like to look out and just check the updates. It's still kind of crazy out there, but I'm super excited to delve into the world of special events. It's my industry, it's what I'm passionate about, and more of how they are pivotal in shaping a city. just taking a look into the agenda of this presentation, we'll be talking about upcoming event overview with objectives and goals, quantifying estimated ROI from events, city partnerships, sponsorship opportunities, and special events coordination and management. And we'll get to talking about these in the next slides. So these are our core event objectives, and in every single one of our events, we try to incorporate some aspect of these objectives. When we provide a space for local artists and performers to showcase their talents, as well as providing a space for local businesses to sell their product, it really shows that the city is dedicated to the community and economic improvement. And we also try to incorporate education and diversity in our events, whether it be showing the different cultural traditions in the holiday extravaganza like we did this past year, or all the multitude of educational demonstrations at Earth Day that just happened. There's always something that you can learn and take from these events. So we have a lot of goals this 2024, and they're pretty clear. We want to increase event attendance, support local entrepreneurs, encourage community participation, engage young audience, reinforce neighborhood activation, promote sustainability, and drive economic improvement. In the next few slides, I'll talk more about how these goals are put into action. But before we talk about the goals this year, I just wanted to mention a study made by the Cultural Alliance of Fairfield County. The Arts and Economic Prosperity Study was done in 2022, and it collected information about revenue and improvement made by the arts and cultural industry in Fairfield County specifically. When people attend an event, they make it an outing. They're not just going to the event. They might get a coffee beforehand, have lunch, go to dinner afterwards, and they're also paying for parking at the same time. So with that in mind, the study came up with an average expenditure of $32.21 per person per event. And this is an average between local and non-local attendees. And this doesn't even include the in-event expenses like admission, on-site food and beverage, merchandise, things like that. So we can only imagine that that total would increase with those included. It also generated 255.3 in economic activity, supported 4,015 jobs, and generated $6 million in local, state, and federal government revenue. So now going into our goals, I just want to talk about 2023 first before I mention 2024 on this slide. 2023 was a huge year for first events, for new events. We introduced the Halloween Night Fair, and it was a huge success. It was 2 full days of fun activities. We closed Sono, and it was just so much fun. It was supposed to be 2 days. The second day was rained out, but we still held it, although the attendance wasn't as good as that first day. But we had an average attendance of around 6,000 people just during those 2 days. So if we multiply that by the $32.21 per person, we're getting an ROI of $193,260 just for Halloween Night Fair. And going on to those holiday events, they both generated the same attendance, about 1,500. So multiplying that, it comes to $48,315 per holiday event. If you add all those 3 events together, that is an ROI of $289,890 just for these 3 events in 2023. We had many other events, so that also will increase and improve the revenue. Now going on to 2024, we want to increase the attendance by 15% at the Halloween Night Fair. So our goal is 7,000. That ROI will then calculate to $225,470. And then same thing with the holiday extravaganza in Wall Street Wonderland. We want to increase the attendance by 50%, 1,500 to 3,000 attendees, which would generate an ROI of $96,690 per holiday event. And I did the math. Together, those three events will generate an ROI of $418,850. Again, just for these three events. We plan on having more events. We've already had events that have impacted businesses. And in order to get this attendance up, we will continue having a bigger social media presence, collaborate with local businesses and organizations, which we'll get into more later. And we also decided to send out a mailed calendar to all of the residents, which is just a little postcard of all the events happening throughout the year. It includes recreation and parks activities, our events, and the larger events like Oyster Festival, Nice Fest, Pride in the Park.
Barbara, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, if I could, yeah, because it's about the attendance. Can I just ask if you have the data? Was there an increase in attendance for the holiday fairs from 2023? Because we did do them that first year in 2020. I'm sorry, in 2022. So we've already had two of those events, right? 2 years.
Yes.
Was there an increase?
I think there was a small increase. I think they had around 1,000 attendees in the first holiday extravaganza, and the Wall Street one was a lower attendance. I'm not sure exactly how much.
Okay, but there was growth. There's growth from year to year.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Each of our larger events allow for local small businesses and vendor pop-ups. We've worked with well over 100 vendors and will continue to provide those spaces for them. We've hosted events and partnered with over 15 local entrepreneurs and organizations and are hoping to increase that number as our events go on. As we strive to foster community participation, our aim is to achieve a satisfaction rate of 85% or higher. And to ensure we're meeting the community's wants and needs, we'll continue to provide free and or affordable activities and events for the community. And something that we haven't done in the past or haven't perfected, and that we'll be really focusing on this year, is our post-event surveys. So we'll get those out to get accurate feedback and see how the community felt about our events and how we can improve in the next years. As we focus on engaging the young crowd, we'll be implementing more activities for the youth and their families. We'll continue to provide outreach to school systems and the youth programs, as well as school and youth program performances, providing them a space to perform. One of our favorite groups is the Norwalk Metropolitan Youth Ballet. We try to invite them to any event that we can, and they always show up and have the cutest performances. And by providing these neighborhood activation, like community projects, partnerships, working with different neighborhood stakeholders and groups, we're attracting all community members all around Norwalk. I know 2024 is a big year for sustainability and environment awareness and just overall being a greener city. And that is something that we do keep in mind when planning events. Moving forward with when we publish our events and promote them, we will be prioritizing and recommending public transportation, carpooling, the Wheels to You service, and to reduce carbon emissions. And also something else that will include a small but mighty change is strategically putting recycling bins right next to garbage cans. That's something we hadn't really considered in the past, but we'll make that change this year. And of course, we can't forget about economic improvement when it comes to event goals. We're hoping to achieve a 15% increase in sales tax revenue for the district, and that can actually be quantified through Placer AI, which we'll talk about in a minute. But this can quantify economic impact of events on local economy, including spending by attendees, revenue generated, and employment opportunities created. So that is a great tool that we can have. So this year we're striving for more partnerships. We've had so many already, and we want to make it known that we're here for organizational support, marketing support, and any insight that we may offer. Already, we've seen an increase in attendance, easier coordination with city departments, and increased event outreach by partnering with organizations and businesses. And I'll mention some of the success stories in the next slides. So one partnership that we've developed this year is a collaboration with EcoEvolution on Washington Street, using some of the vacant storefronts to have vendors and activities. And each month is a different theme. We actually just had our first one in April, and the theme was sustainability, vintage, and thrift, which is so on brand for EcoEvolution and for Norwalk. This month, actually next weekend, we'll be having her marketplace, and that'll focus on prioritizing women-owned businesses and success stories. And there will also be a little fashion show with nurses showing off their outfits. So that'll be awesome. And it's just so much fun. The attendance was great in April. It was kind of a day, but regarding weather, but we still had quite a few attendees. And then in June, we'll have our marketplace, which is for LGBTQIA plus businesses. It is the same day as Pride in the Park, but it is in no way a competition in between them. They are actually well aware that we're having this event at the same time. And the whole purpose is to foster a better connection between Veterans Park and South Norwalk. So I think the biggest success story that we've had this far with partnerships is the Earth Day Festival that just happened. When first joining the planning group, it was known that prior attendance only reached up to 400 attendees, and they wanted to get to a goal of 600, I believe. And if we got to 600, we'd be great. We'd be happy about it. But because of our involvement and involvement of other fantastic organizations and other city departments, we were able to generate an attendance of over 2,000 people, well over the 600 goal. So we were also happy about it, and the feedback has been great. And you can see there was so much happening here in the schedule of events, and there was always something going on. And I think about 60 vendors were present to inform attendees about their respective impact on the environment and their community. As you can see here, there's lots of smiling faces, everyone having a good time. I've heard over and over again that the most memorable part about this event was just seeing people smile. And to me, that's a successful event in itself. But see on the bottom right here, that's the Metropolitan Youth Ballet. They always generate a good crowd and get people going. And we also sponsored the entertainment portion. So we did sponsor the Norwalk Metropolitan Youth Ballet, but also on the top left, that is the Cukes. They are an all ukulele band, and they were great. And we also had ARC soundstage lighting for all of the sound needs. I think in past years, they had the churches donate their speakers, which worked, but they got a lot of complaints with noise and sound quality. So ARC was able to solve all those problems. And it was just proof that Norwalk needs more events like this. And I don't know, it was just a fun day. Another partnership that we'll be doing, or that we've been working on, is with Triangle Community Center with Pride in the Park. We've been offering help with their family hour programming, giving them activities to get their attendance up in their family hour. We find that all of our events are so well attended by kids and their families, and we want to continue doing that. And I think now we've got the gist of how to get them in there. So we gave them help on that. And we're also working with them on parking, bus routes, and the Wheels to You services, and we're coordinating that with the Norwalk Transit District as well. If you haven't heard of Silent Book Club, then I don't know where you've been, because it's been growing rapidly. Basically what it is a group of readers come together in a public place like a bar, cafe, bookstore to read together quietly. But there's no assigned book to read. You bring your own reading material. You come, order a drink, sit down, read in complete silence for over an hour. And it's completely free to attend and has been growing rapidly, as I said. Someone local to Norwalk actually opened the Norwalk branch and reached out to Sabrina and I asking for help in securing venues. And, you know, we know a lot of businesses and venues in town, so we are able to help her out every single month. And it really just aligns with what we want to do with the city and our own personal interests. We're two avid readers, so, you know, why not help? Our first event was held at Space Cat Brewing, and I think about 15 people showed up. Great first meeting. Our second one in March was at Eco Evolution, and that had 30 attendees, so it's doubling. And our last meeting in April was at 314 Beer Garden, and there were 60 people there. So as you can see, it's doubling each meeting, and now we're expecting 120 people, but there's not a venue in Norwalk that can hold 120 people easily and have us just read. So we decided to cut those one meetings a month in half, do 2 a month. So our next one is going to be at Eco Evolution again on May 7th. So if you want to sign up, you can go to SBC Norwalk on Instagram. It's a lot of fun. Some other successful events that we've put on. When I first started the game night was one of my first events that I put on. I had no idea that it was going to be such a success. We partnered with Battlegrounds Gaming and did a Dungeons and Dragons night on Washington Street Plaza. They took care of the reservations, and I think about 40 people came. So we found that there are a lot of niches in Norwalk, and we're continuing to discover those interests and provide events for those interests. We also have been sponsoring karaoke night at 314 Beer Garden. It's been such a success too. The regulars were so surprised with the first one. I think the MC said we could have kept going for 2 hours. So we'll continue to sponsor those here and there, and they're just a fun time and a great way to get the community together. And also Sabrina and I were invited to the new resident meetup at Eco Evolution, and it was put on by the Belongfulness Project. So Sabrina was able to speak to new residents in Norwalk and talk about what's available in Norwalk, what we offer, and just, you know, hidden gems, and just to meet new people. And the mayor was supposed to speak there, but it was the night where all the trees were falling, so he couldn't make it, which is totally understandable. But hopefully at our next new resident meetup, he can meet it and talk to his new residents. All right, we want to bring back a very popular summer celebration that ended in 2009. If you haven't already guessed it, we want to bring back or reinvent the Sono Harbor Splash. It was a huge hit. Again, it ended in 2009, and we can't confirm that it'll be called that or be exactly that, but we know we want to do a larger celebration in the summer that incorporates the water, because the harbor and the Norwalk River is such a key part of Norwalk history. We're hopeful in making it happen and can't wait to start planning things for this event, like getting music, art, and live mural demonstrations. But of course, we can't do this without, you know, proper partnerships, community members, and of course, funding, which brings me to the next point. Our sponsorships. In order to do all these events, we've been seeking partnerships with businesses and organizations that share the same vision as us, just to provide great events for the community and make a positive impact. We offer many different tiers for sponsorships, which will be shown in the next slide. But in order to continue doing city-hosted events, these partnerships really are necessary. in 2023, Stu Leonard's, King Industries, and Fairfield County Bank were able to sponsor our holiday events and our events in 2023, which we're very grateful for. But this year we're striving for more sponsorships. And as you can see, the levels go from $100 all the way up to $10,000. And really any amount is appreciated and helps. So we are actively seeking these sponsorships, and it's still a work in progress. So when working with the Earth Day organizers and members, I found it was such an efficient and enjoyable process, which can be really rare in event planning. Event planning is stressful. There's a lot of moving parts, and it is easier and more enjoyable when there's more people involved with the event. So we are now, putting more of an effort into getting the internal departments more involved, especially the ones who are in the approval process. And we're also meeting with external people, people who are interested in events and key event stakeholders, or anyone who can bring something to our events and make an impact on the community. And also we are now overlooking the e-approval special event applications. We're not approving anything. We're just overlooking it, making sure that each application and applicant has the necessary information for all the departments. So I'll be serving as like the mediator for everybody involved, just to make it easier. And I also made an entire event calendar with all of the events happening in Norwalk. And also we're, like I said before, we're always offering that helping hand to any organizers who want to put on an event and are maybe struggling with the event application process. As we continue creating events in Norwalk for 2024, and we will be generating events, we'll strive to make them exciting, foster connection, empower collaboration, pursue growth, and I'll add this, even though it's not on the slide, ensure each event is safe, doable, and in the best interest of our community. And just through collaboration and support from our community and all around, we can achieve that. That is the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Anna. That was wonderful.
Thanks.
Those were excellent slides too. Those got some serious game. Does anyone have any questions for Anna about the presentation before we get into the items themselves? Okay. Then we're going to move on to item 2. So I'm just going to read it for the record. Authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute a contract with Placer Labs, Inc. for a data software unlimited license in the amount of $34,000 via sole source procurement. Sabrina, Anna, I don't know who wants to take this, but
I'll take it. Anna touched on it.
I'll move it for you, Josh.
Oh my God. Not even thinking.
It's okay. It's okay.
Thank you. Whoops. I appreciate it. All right. So it's moved by Councilmember Smith. Now, Sabrina.
Thank you. And I know I touched on this and as did Anna. So we are interested, as well as members of the public as well, are always interested in kind of the return on investment for, where our money is going and kind of what we're getting back for that. So we did a lot of research to see what platforms are out there that could get us this information. Placer AI is one that's very unique, number one, but number two is very affordable. So that $32,000 option is actually for unlimited licenses. So other departments in the city can also use the software, but the software itself is essentially you log in, you create an account, and then you can compare location to location, drawn geography to drawn geography, address to address, all across the country. You can compare to other similar municipalities, other similar points of interest, or just literally day-to-day activities. So say we had an event for the Halloween event, for example. So say we had that the weekend of Halloween. we would be able to compare that weekend sales revenue from those businesses in a selected geography and compare that to a weekend that is in the same kind of season that we didn't have the event, or even compare it to 2 years prior before we even had the event at all. So it'll be interesting for us to have that information to really see the impact that the events are making, both small and large. But in addition to that, we can use them for other assets that we have in the city. For example, we can use them, say we improve a park. We can compare, once the improvements are done, how many individuals are using that park compared to individuals before that improvement was made. So it's very interesting software, very useful from a data perspective to get all the information on actual people that are going places and what they're spending there. They gave us an example of the Sono collection, for example. So they would compare it to somewhere of similar interest in a different municipality, such as the Stamford Town Mall. And we could see kind of the attendance to both of those things. But also in addition to that, it tracks a person. I know this sounds kind of creepy, but this is what technology is nowadays. If somebody comes to our event from out of state, it'll be able to track that, but it'll also be able to track where they go from our event or from our park or from our city. So we're able to see not only residents that we're attracting to these locations, but also out-of-towners that are going to these locations. So it becomes a tool that we can use not only to get kind of monetary investment, kind of what we're getting for economic benefit, but also just purely attendance numbers and being able to track where people are going. And, you know, we won't have the why of why they go to certain places, but if we see that somebody's coming to Norwalk, but then they're going to stay in Fairfield, or they're going to stay in Greenwich or Bridgeport, why they're doing that and where we can fill those gaps. So it's really a great tool for all of our departments to be able to use, but specifically for events is why we're here, is kind of to track that ROI and see our impact to our local businesses, which is the purpose of these larger events being held in kind of our urban core areas.
Thank you. Any questions for Sabrina? The only question I had, and I just was looking through, I think there was in the memo provided about this, about the fact that the data actually cuts across not just Norwalk, but other municipalities. And I was wondering if other municipalities have retained, you know, like around here have retained services like this and might have data that could help us.
So they only allow us to pull the direct sales tax revenue and all the kind of incremental data points for ourselves. We can compare to other municipalities, but another municipality wouldn't be able to pull our data essentially for us and share it. They have multiple clients across the US, some in Connecticut, some in New York. They're kind of all over the place. But they have the information to be able to compare. But say if Bridgeport contracted with them, they wouldn't be able to pull our specific Norwalk data. They would only be able to compare it to their own data, if that makes sense.
No, that totally makes sense. It was just something that piqued my interest. Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, thanks. You know, I just want to take a minute to say how much I really support these events that you've been having, we've been having as a city. They really bring us together as a community. You know, my kids are long grown, right? And you know, but I'm a kid at heart, right? And so I love to go to the events for myself, right? To have fun. But the enjoyment of seeing families have so much fun and kids enjoying themselves so much, and the community of, you know, people that are just having a really great time. And, you know, I know it's an investment, right? And what I see you're working on is ways to bring in sponsorship. So, you know, ultimately, you know, less from the city side and more from the sponsors. But I think these are really, really important events for our community. And, you know, I want to comment too on Earth Day, to see it grow so exponentially. I mean, what a beautiful thing. And, you know, and this, you know, Jalen, I'm going to give you some kudos here, but to be able to use the green the way we have been able to the last couple of years where we hadn't been before, you know, that location creates perfect place for Earth Day. And so, you know, I really, really feel strongly about supporting these events. So I just had to say that. And it's going to be really wonderful to have this kind of data that, you know, we will be able to, it seems to me that, you know, not just establishing the return on investment, right? Of course, we want a return on investment, but it's probably going to give us information, right, to make the events even better.
Exactly. And that's the point of it. I mean, ROI is a big portion of it, but we can get a lot of information on different demographics for these folks as well. So if we're missing kind of a certain demographic that we're wanting to draw in, for example, we have a large Hispanic community in Norwalk. So if our attendance for that kind of demographic is low, what can we be providing at our certain events that will specifically draw in those individuals, but also support those individuals and, you know, make it a place for everyone. So we're excited to have that information to be able to see kind of where we can tailor certain aspects of our events in their entirety to really be inclusive of everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't want to forget to say, because, you know, we did get quite a few emails a few weeks ago from the businesses about how much they really appreciate these events and how beneficial they are to our small businesses, that we can support them in this way. So I think it's important to recognize that as well.
Councilmember Murray.
Yes, I was curious, particularly because of Earth Day. We actually have started to get, you know, our events have started with city interest, but Earth Day started to generate interest from vendors and inquiries from our communications outside the city. I'm wondering if we work with the state, if we've gotten to that point yet, or if we have intention to work with the State Convention and Visitors Bureau. I know sometimes they have reports and data on what our market share would be on a state level for drawing that business into Norwalk from our local towns. Is there any kind of data on that, or any kind of looking towards that future for some of the events? Like, I know Earth Day probably will pull. We were getting people from Ossining and you know, inquiring. So I know we want to serve our city, but those extra dollars are nice too. So what information do you have on that at this point, if any?
So we don't have information on those kind of visitor information at this point because we just don't have any means of getting it. We didn't do event surveys this year, but we also didn't have any software that would have tracked that. Placer AI can do that for us, which would be great to have. But from a partnering standpoint, I'm part of the CT Tourism Board, specifically also in Western Connecticut, so our Western Connecticut region. So we all do meet kind of on a bi-monthly basis, once on Zoom, once in person kind of thing. And we talk about all of our events coming up. We're making sure that we're not overlapping on a lot of stuff because we want to make sure that people from other municipalities are able to come to wherever the closest event is or wherever they want to travel to an event. So we are doing that partnership on the back end from like a planning standpoint, but actually being able to track attendees, we haven't been able to do that except for literally asking folks, hey, where are you from? Like for Ryan Cabrera, we had people come from Massachusetts, which is amazing, but we wouldn't have known that unless we, you know, asked the question. So.
I wonder, and I'm just asking this because I worked at Starwood before at a previous life. There's a report called a Hotelligence, which you would need which is expensive and we probably can't afford, which you need a subscription for, but you do probably have, I would imagine, hotel partners and people in that group that you're talking about that may share with you. And they have a sense of people coming in from outside for their hotels and where they're coming from and things like that. And that might provide you know, maybe not scientific level data, but also something for us to think about when we're looking for vendors and things like that for Earth Day, if we're looking to expand at some point. So just a suggestion. I'd be happy to help on it if you ever wanted me to.
We would love the help. We do want to increase the amount of vendors that we have at our events specifically as well. Of course, we're focusing hyper local because that's who we have the most access to at this point, and we love to support, you know, our local residents. But the more the merrier, honestly. At this point, we collect, you know, vendor fees from that, but also it draws in more people. If somebody is a vendor from upstate Connecticut, they tell, you know, all their friends and family, hey, I'm going to be down in Norwalk at this event, and that, you know, creates some further outreach for us. So anything that we can do, and if you can help us, that'd be amazing. We're happy to do that.
Sure. And I also just wanted to mention really, some
Mm.
of our public comment talked about partnerships. And I think I just wanted to mention Earth Day was wonderful in the partnerships. People tend to associate just like monetary value, but there were so many partners that did, in-kind work that kept that budget down. So thank you for all that work to make that happen.
Of course, thanks. Happy to do it. It was great. It was a great partnership for us.
Okay. I'm going to call, unless anyone has any other questions, I'm going to call for a vote on the item that is on the floor regarding the contract with Placer Labs. All in favor? Okay, that is unanimous. Now, the second item number 3, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute a 3-year contract with 2 one-year extension options with ARC Sound Stage Lighting LLC in the amounts of $92,510 for year 1, $97,585 for year 2, and $102,760 for year 3 for purchasing project 4341R Stage Lighting and Sound Services. Account numbers noted. Do I have a motion? Councilmember Freyer.
Thank you. So I'll take this one again. So I provided a memo that gave you a lot of background for the RFP process, but essentially we hadn't went out to RFP for these services before, except for the holiday events. The Halloween event, there was too quick of a turnaround for us to be able to execute an full RFP process. So we decided to go through the purchasing department to be able to do it kind of in the down season, in the January, February season, to actually put a holistic RFP out for all of our events for the next couple of years, essentially. We wanted to focus on somebody who was affordable, somebody who is local, and somebody who has really great references. We've worked with ARC before, which was one of their major feathers in their caps, but also they were the most affordable option. They're also a Norwalk-based company, which we were very happy to be able to support a Norwalk business. We did the RFP and we got responses back. We had 3 responses. Only 1 was complete, but even if the other 2 were complete, the response amount for ARC Soundstage Lighting was half of the price of the next closest bidder. A lot of these other companies are either renting their own equipment or buying new equipment for the needs that we have. ARC has the ability to already have those things, which is why the cost is significantly lower. It's also because of the fact that they've done this with us before, so they kind of know what to expect, rather than just having the information of how many people, what we're looking for, et cetera, et cetera. So with this process, we were able to select through the purchasing department kind of our preferred vendor that would work with us, which has been great if it is selected, because we've worked with them before. We know how it works. They've helped us secure entertainment as well, which is not a part of this actual bid. We didn't include it mainly because somebody can put in $5 million from Beyonce and $2 for some guy to busk on the street. So we wanted to make it fairer by just putting kind of soundstage and lighting in there only, so that it made the bids more, comparable to each other. So that's kind of where we're at. If anybody has more specific questions on what they provide, what the prices are, the selected consultant is here in the attendee list. So if anybody has specific questions, we're happy to allow him to speak and answer them for us.
Does anyone have any questions? Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, I have a question and a couple comments. One is I am glad to see this has gone through the RFP process. And ARC has done some excellent jobs for us. Very, very, very professional. And you mentioned Earth Day. Them doing the sound for Earth Day. I mean, there really was a significant difference in the sound. So I know they do excellent work. So my question is, the contract is, we know the specific events that we have, right? So they'll cover all of the events. what if, there's a decision to like add in a couple small events here or there? Would that be covered under this contract as well?
It would be up to the vendor if they're able to provide the flexibility within the budget to do so. If this does get approved, we're planning on having kind of a sit down budgeting session to see if we can do more events within the budget confines that we have already. Like we said, we want to do a summer event. We want to do these small one-off events. So if they don't fit into that contract, we would have to find other means of getting funding for those things and also do kind of a separate RFP or procurement process for those. But if it is within the vendor's capability to stay within that budget to provide additional events, they can do so.
I see. Okay. Thanks.
And Sabrina, I mean, just to clarify, I know it said in the paperwork that it included the event schedule for the events I already know about, but also these flex events. I assume that's what you're talking about, that, if there is the sort of one-off, that it is encompassed in this contract.
Yeah.
So long as it fits within the time frame.
Yeah, the only reason we didn't include those amounts that were listed for the flex events is because they were too open for interpretation. So you can provide, something like Earth Day that costs us a couple $1,000, or something that's like Halloween, which costs us tens of thousands of dollars. So we wanted to leave it open to have that capability, but we also didn't want to have a price set for those that we were tied into, essentially, considering we don't know if we're going to spend that much on these flex events. Like for the summer event, is it going to be smaller than Halloween? Probably. So we don't want to lock in at something that's $80,000 additional dollars when in reality, we might only need something like 10, for example.
Thank you. Councilmember Seed.
Yeah, I had just the same kind of the concern with like locking in with the 3 years. Like as you guys know, like with the budgeting process and everything, if we lock in like to do the 3 events, like does it tie the city down to have to hold the events for like 3 years? Not saying that we want to cancel them, but just saying like with the budget process how it is, like what if we get to a point where we can't afford to do it?
So in our contracts, we always have the option to cancel based on funding availability. That's written into every contract that we have. We're hoping that this approval and having that 2 other year options just means we don't really have to go back out to RFP every single year, and we can stick with the same person. So all of this is dependent upon funding sources, essentially. And the hope is that we'll be able to solicit sponsorship going forward to where the request on the capital budget side is actually going to be significantly less going forward.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dunn.
I have a lot of concerns about this. It's a lot of money. That's definitely a want versus a need, as we talk about. I come from the background of being an event director. We talk about Splash. Jim, we worked on Splash, right? I do have those budgets. I mean, not having an entire budget for an event is really concerning. The entire budget for Sono Art Celebration last time I was the president was $80,000 for, a full weekend full of 7 stages and stuff like that. So it just does not seem, it seems more like a slush fund in some ways. I just, without more information, I'm not really surprised. So I would suggest getting some budgets, maybe from Oyster Festival. What are they paying for stuff like that? And, we can provide, I still have the budgets from Splash Festival when I was one of those directors, and Sono and some of the others, Norg Art Festival. If you needed comparables. The other comment that I have to make is going back to Sono Art Celebration, I think that your sponsorship levels are way too low. An upper sponsorship level, you could probably, depending on the number of people, you really should try to reach for that $20,000 range would be my suggestion. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Heather, for that. And I'll reach out to you separately because I think your input on all of this stuff can really help us. We're kind of like starting everything from scratch. So having that backup would be amazing. And we also have the budget for Harbor Splash. We were in connection with the woman who worked at the health department and has recently retired, who helped organize everything. So we have all of her pamphlets information. So we're excited to kind of use that and bring something back. We do have extensive line item budgets for all of this, all of the events that we have. So if you'd like to see those, we have that readily available. We can send them over. We also have a proposed budget. We have what we spent last year, obviously, but we also have the proposed breakdown budget for line item by line item for this upcoming year as well for each of the events that we're proposing.
And I also think the return on investment we'd like to see is more really viable businesses. I'd like to, as much as it's about what people are spending, it's how many businesses are actually staying. And, it's great for a weekend, but is it driving business long-term enough that the people are actually returning, to those places? And I think a lot of your events that you're talking about, like the Silent Book Club, I do those in New York City, and it's like people do return events like that are not just one-offs, that are less expensive to do. I'd personally like to see more of a focus on that going forward in the meantime, until we get kind of the placer information about its impact on our businesses. Yeah.
Yeah, we love those events too. It's great. Like we said, it's great to have those event partners. That's how those events are successful, is because we have kind of a bunch of people around the table to help us execute those. We're looking to continue the book clubs and other kind of smaller one-off events, as you described, like the karaoke was one of them. The new resident meetups are another one. We had these ideas for Wacky Wednesdays as well that will probably start up as well, which are just random one-off events in obscure locations that can draw people in to gather excitement on those. And like you said, those are kind of the low-cost events that we're also going to be doing this year. We're targeting about 15 a year, and that's minus the book club. So those would be 15 additional events that don't include the monthly book clubs or bi-monthly book clubs now, since they've been super successful for us. But I'm hoping, to your point about the business retention piece, we do hear some information from them about the events, how they make those days successful, but we're hoping to not only gather them around the table to talk about events directly, but number two, be able to actually survey them to get that information kind of not just one-off by talking to folks. We have been sitting down with our business community and business owners, specifically a lot of the restaurant owners that want to actually partner with us on events or things that they were looking to do that they don't necessarily have the capacity to do themselves. So we're happy to focus a lot on those things, and we have been. So we're excited to start executing stuff on that front as well.
And just to go back, the placer things, one of the running the Westport Art Festival, which is down on thank God moved it back to the street. A lot of the businesses were not very happy with, art booths up and stuff like that up against their storefronts, and said that they actually lost money the weekend of their sales were down. However, I would bet over, like people coming back, over the next couple of weekends. So my other suggestion would be to do a more long range look at foot traffic for that, things like that. I know.
Yeah, I think that would be great to look at for sure. And to your point, our businesses don't necessarily like when we put vendors in front of their events either. We've been very selective with the positioning of our vendors for that reason. We've been very grateful to partner with AGW partners to use the vacant spaces. I think that's one thing that we're going to be doing going forward. But also when we close the streets and do have vendors, we give the space that's right in front of the open storefront to the business to be able to come out onto the street with tables or what have you, to kind of not have that issue so much. But to your point, I think definitely the returners, because of that event going on, I think it's definitely something we should look at as well. I think it'd be great information.
And also, I know like Splash Festival, we had a chowder cook-off, which is great because it brought people into the restaurants. But with like Sono Art Celebration, we had street food. We had a food court where we just took a percentage of the food sales, but the restaurant revenues were down during the weekend from whatever. So those are some things to really look at long term when you're trying to share that information with the businesses.
We'll be in touch for sure. I don't want to keep everybody, but we'll reach out to you separately, Heather, for all of your wisdom for sure. We need it.
Councilmember Seed.
Yeah, I was like kind of torn on this. The presentation was great. And the only reason I was torn, not because of the events, because I think they're great and my kids actually love them, and just happy they got to see the fire trucks and sit in the fire trucks at the Christmas events and the Halloween events were really fun, but just because of the money. And I've been vocal at the city. I mean, there's things like the family navigators that we didn't fund that really kind of is what really kind of tears me with like spending the money with this. And it's like I said, it's not the event because I think they're great, but it's really because of this as a city, we didn't fund certain things that, like Ms. Dunn said, it's like a need. That's why I was kind of torn. But with the money, like we just voted to have the study and we can't do or have the data, we can't get the data if we don't fund the events to do them. So it just doesn't make sense, like with the return on investment. Also the breakdown, it's like about $30,000 at the event, pretty much, like give or take. So and then plus with the to come back next year, I think we need the data with that. Still kind of torn just because of the money. But I do think that these events are great. But a lot of my constituents have had concerns about the money that's spent on these events, and that's why I'm kind of torn on this. But the presentation was great, and it's like pulling me even more toward. But I just want to say thank you for that, and just kind of those are kind of my concerns with that. But again, they're not really your issues. It's just issues of like the city and things that we have going on.
Yeah, and just to respond to that, we are actively looking for sponsorship. Like our goal is to never have to request the amount that we've had in the past. We're actively looking for sponsorship. We're hopeful that now that we have the baseline of what our events have produced and what our events look like, how many people are coming, that we're able to get those sponsors in more easily than we would have before. The first year was kind of a shot in the dark. Hey, we're putting this on for the first time. Please, help us out. And, we have great businesses and partners in the community that were able to do that for us. But we're hopeful now that we have some numbers behind it, some data behind it, we're able to say, hey, these are how many people that show up to this event. Please sponsor our entertainment. Please sponsor our kids' corner. Please sponsor this. So we're hopeful that the requests will continue to decrease. The last year, we only got, Anna, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe like $15,000 in contributions at a maximum, maybe. But we're looking to at least like continue to double that year over year, and working with Heather, I think, to really target some folks, but also have amounts that make sense for us, I think will help us out as well when we make those asks.
All right. Thank you to that. And then also to Barbers Fund, you guys are welcome on the green whenever. So keep using the green.
We love the green. We do. It's a great location.
Councilmember Murray, I think, had her hand up first.
Jim didn't get to speak yet, so I'll defer for Jim and go after him.
Councilmember Freyer.
I feel honored. So yeah, I think that's, I think the key to this whole thing is the Placer AI software that we're going to have. I mean, we're in the consumer business. We're trying to get people to come and live and buy and entertain themselves and get involved with the city. And so we're selling the city at all times. In order to sell it, we've got to advertise. We've got to market ourselves to get people in. On behalf of our. I mean, it's no different than a mall. A mall has to advertise to get people to come into the stores that they have in that mall. So we're no different. And I think the fact that we've got market research data that we're going to be able to rely on, we can tailor these events to the people that we think are going to be, most interested in Norwalk, the people that are going to come back to Norwalk, the people that are going to move to Norwalk, that are going to make our economy stronger. So I hear what you're saying, Jalen, that it's expensive, but we do have an out. We can take a look and we can see the performance. We can see the return on our investment. We can see the the improvement in the local economy and the local retailers, quite quickly. And we can adjust our program, or we could cut back on it too, for that matter. So I think we've got a lot of flexibility here. And yeah, it's a lot of money now, but I think when we start looking at some of the metrics, like the revenue that and sales tax information that tell us what kind of revenue is being generated by these different events, I think we have the ability to turn them off or turn them on and make them better and perform even more than we expected. So I know it's money, and you got to spend money to make money sometimes. So I'm all in favor of this.
Thank you, Councilmember Murray.
I'll give up the rest of my time to Council Member Murray.
Thank you, Jim. Really, I'm really in agreement with what Jim said, and also with Heather saying that we can probably get more for sponsorships, but also I do think it really is event dependent. We have to remember that not one size fits all. I think we can be profitable, but looking at each one. So there's certain events where the goal of the event is to push vendors and education, and we're looking at smaller vendors like Earth Day. So a big title sponsor might cannibalize that focus on our small businesses that are part of that community space that we want to go to. And so in-kind donations may be the way to go. And then other ones like the Halloween might be a big $20,000 sponsor. So I just wanted to state that to manage, public comment has said, and we've heard in the public before, why don't you have a bigger sponsor? But there isn't going to be a one size fits all, right? To determine whether these are profitable. It's going to be what we need in the moment. And also we're very different than if we're just throwing an event. Like when I was at American Cancer Society, we were just raising money and advertising people. That's not just our goal here on the city level. Our goal is also for building those small businesses and making sure they get tax dollars, and those big sponsors can sometimes cannibalize that. So unless I'm wrong, I just wanted to manage expectations on that.
No, I think you're 100% on point with that. I think the major sponsors are for kind of our larger events, but that's why we have those tiers, and we go as low as $100 just to make sure we're not being exclusionary for anyone. If somebody wants to put their name on something, we're happy to get their name out there for them with social media and all that other kind of website information that we're able to support the local businesses on. But I think that's one thing, we had a quick turnaround for a lot of these things. Anna only came on board in, July, I believe. She was remote for the month. She was physically here right after that. So we were kind of quick on the whip with these things. But now we have kind of more lead time where we're able to make those partnerships with those businesses. Like I said, they're interested. We've talked to them already. So it's really just bringing them to the table and seeing what we can do kind of with a planning session from all different aspects to make our costs lower, but also to make the outreach better and the partnerships better, to make the events holistically better. So
and just one real quick follow-up. It would be great. Anna's presentation was so wonderful, and I would love to see a pro forma maybe, but we're talking about how to improve budget season. And I know you're not going to have it all this year because you're still building it. But it would be great to kind of be able to look forward and say, this is what we feel like we're getting out of, year forward. So even if we can't build it this next year, maybe year after, a year over year, and be able to show that, because I found this very helpful in understanding the goals of the whole economic and community development department as a whole. So I really appreciate it again.
Thanks so much, Anna. You crushed it.
Councilmember Dunn.
I just have one more question. Do you have a list of deliverables depending on the sponsor levels, what they get? Can you forward that on to us as well?
Yep, we have a whole
t-shirt or where they're.
Yeah, we pulled the pricing information, but we have a whole sponsorship kind of document that outlines everything for you, so we can send that over to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Before we take the vote, I just wanted to make one other comment, and I think just on a broader perspective, I don't know if you've seen, there's a lot of national coverage over sort of the loneliness epidemic and people feeling a lot of times a lack of joy in their lives and sort of general feelings of despair and malaise. And And one of the things that I have learned in watching Sabrina and Anna and the team put together a lot of these events and going to a lot of these events is that they inspire real joy. And one of the things I think that is such an important function of government at its core is making people's lives better, and providing joy in people's lives, I think, is a fundamental part of that. And I think investing in that and giving people, I mean, I've never seen, it really just blow my mind every year how much people love the holidays and how exciting it is for families and how much they look forward to it. And I think it's important for us to help make that a reality so that families can enjoy it year after year. And I'm receptive to a lot of the goals of getting more corporate sponsorship and sort of defraying the costs from the city over time. But I think the overall goal is we want to make people's lives better, and we want to, and these events are a way to do that. Obviously, there are vastly more important things like making, the roads work and making sure that people are safe. But joy is important, and we should invest in joy. That's just my 2 cents. But Councilmember Seed, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think the conversation that was just with Ms. Dunn and Sabrina and the team, I think that kind of swayed me in the sense that we're going to do the work to try to make sure as a team, not just the team, the staff, but if with the help of Heather and other people who have experience to help get better better sponsorships. I think we have to front the bill. But we could work in the next couple of months to kind of make sure that we don't have to actually pay it. We could get the sponsorships for it. So I think the kind of teamwork that makes the dream work.
Exactly. I think I couldn't have said it better myself. Does anyone have any comments before call for a vote?
Well said. I just want to say well said, Josh, and Jalen too. That's a beautiful way to wrap this up.
I just have a question about it. So this is a 3-year contract. So at what point do we come back and try shift gears if something's not working? My concern is the extension of the contract and do you know what I'm saying? And my other issue is, what's the deadline for signing this? For me personally, before I vote yes for something, I'd like to have a little more documentation.
So we would come back year after year because it would be dependent on funding. That's when you would have to rectify it. The 3 years in there is just ensuring that we don't have to go back out to RFP essentially. That this is kind of the baseline for what we're looking for. And again, it's all dependent on funding. So if funding doesn't happen for whatever reason, or funding is half and we are getting sponsorship for the other half, we can be flexible on that year over year. And we're hopeful that next year we'll have kind of that data as well to be able to talk to that information. But on the signature part, on the mayor's part, we would be going to council to the next council meeting. And then the contract would probably take, the legal department usually takes about a week or so. And that's when the mayor would execute the contract. We would just need something in place essentially before the holiday events come. But the only reason we had to bring it kind of now rather than later is that their bid expires. There's like a 60 or 90 day kind of leeway for the bid to expire where we have to do the process over again. So that's why it's in front of you now. But we wouldn't need an actual we won't have our first event with using ARC essentially until Halloween time, but we have to secure entertainment and things like that. We will procure those separately. So the contract that's in front of you right now would go to council at your next meeting and get signature for the mayor. But that's kind of the timeline of when we would actually be using the contract, if that makes sense.
Are we allowing the the Arts Commission to choose the music and stuff like that?
So we haven't in the past. We've looked at to get our musicians. We usually are either looking locally for the smaller events where the Arts Commission does help us out. Mark who's on the commission, obviously, he knows a lot of artists that are local that we can use. So we've used those individuals for our smaller events. For our larger events, to get the better bang for our buck, we have our ARC soundstage lighting. In our last event, was able to see events that were happening in New York City that same night. So we would get a super discounted rate for them to essentially make a stop, do a set in Norwalk and go to the city. So we look for the most kind of affordable option in that regard. But for our smaller musicians, we do get the input and suggestions from the Arts Commission. We also have a list of those individuals that we've kind of been building at this point. As well. Luke Molina is one of the local artists that we kind of use for everything locally. But for the marketplaces specifically too, we had probably about 6 or 7 different local musicians that participated in that. And we utilized the Arts Commission for that specifically.
Just want to make sure they were pulled into. Okay.
Yeah.
Councilmember Lopez.
Oh, yes. Hi. So I just wanted to say, Anna, thank you very much for the presentation. That was fantastic. And Sabrina, also for all the work you guys have been doing together. I fully support you guys and everything that you do. Now I'm going to the future. Obviously, you know, there is room for improvement, but there's room for improvement in everything that we do in life. So good job, and I fully support you guys.
Thank you so much. We
You're
appreciate it.
I also think it's worth mentioning. This dawned on me, you know, and you know, earlier or just a few minutes ago. I don't know if anyone saw, there was a press release earlier this week that there's a website called livability.com that gave us actually a remarkably favorable rating. I think we were rated like the most livable community in Connecticut and like the top 100 in the US. Events like this are a part of the reason why we get ranked highly in these things. And it's why we, you know, people really want to live here and really want to be part of this community. And that's, you know, I do think there is a larger through line, and I like that everyone is. I think we're all in agreement on the larger goal. It's just a matter of how we get there. And that's the sense I've gotten from a really productive discussion tonight. And obviously there's a lot of work to do in the future. And I'm just really glad that we're all committed to helping do that work. So with that, I'm going to call a vote unless anyone's got anything else to say. All right, with that, all in favor of taking this item to the full council? That is unanimous. Okay, with that, I'm going to need one other motion. Councilmember Dunn.
Adjourn.
All right, adjourn. All right, everybody. Thanks for a wonderful meeting.
Yeah,
Have a
just so
great
you guys
night.
know, I'm never making a motion to adjourn.
Well, you want to stay all night, Jalen.
Just keep going.
Yeah, yeah.
We're gonna buy you a TV, Jalen.
Oh my God.
Or just stay
Good
by
night.
yourself, Jalen.
Good night and go Nick.
Night.
Good night.